Good evening, everyone, and welcome to tonight's Planning Committee of the 25th of September 2024. The first item on the agenda, apologies for absence. Are there any apologies for absence? Right, thank you. Item 2, is the record of the meeting held on 28th of August 24 approved, along with the update... along with the update in the supplementary agenda for reasons for refusal in relation to minute 252 as agreed with planning spokes. Is that agreed? Yeah. Item 3 on the agenda, I can confirm that there are no late items which do not appear on the main agenda. Item 4, do any members have any disclosable pecuniary interests or other significant interests? Councillor Etheridge.
Thank you, Chairman. My usual standard declaration of that I attend various parish council meetings, but do not attend or confirm with them on any planning issues.
Thank you. Councillor Hubbard.
Okay, in regard to item 7, following the allegations levelled against me at last week's planning presentation by the representative of the agent DHA Planning Limited, the following is for the record. First of all, a none interest. I do not and never had a direct personal interest. The owners and residents of Manor House are relatives of my wife. However, they're extremely distant from each other. They've never been close. I recently provided a detailed statement to the Chair, Chief Planner and the Committee Clerk, who has recorded that statement and placed it on file. The second one is a non-pecuniary interest. I did meet with a representative of the applicant on site on Friday the 13th, Mr. Edward Wright, who is the Director of the Heritage Design and Development Team Limited, and I spoke for approximately 10 minutes. Amongst other things, we briefly spoke on planning matters related to this application and the Manor Farm Housing Estate Reserved Matters planning application. The meeting was not planned. We bumped into each other. I was visiting the site in readiness for last week's planning presentation. That's it.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else? Okay, before moving on to the remainder of the agenda, is it agreed by members that Councillor Spalding speaks on agenda item 5, land adjacent to Fenn Street and Ratcliffe Road? And for agenda item 7, Manor Farm Quarry, although this is in Strood Rural, it borders with Strood North Ward. Councillor Hubbard has asked to speak as Ward Councillor for Strood North Ward. Is this agreed by members? Thank you. Now for the first planning application, agenda item 5, land adjacent to Farm Street. Tom Stubbs, Senior Planner, will be presenting this application. Over to you, Tom.
Thank you, Chairperson. Good evening, members. This application seeks planning permission for the construction of 44 new homes with the provision of parking, open spaces, suds and earthworks, providing of an overflow car parking for the Fenn Conservation Project and enhancement to existing accesses from Fenn Street on adjacent land to Fenn Street and Ratcliffe Highway. Members, I'd like to draw your attention to the supplementary agenda, which includes the amended wording for condition 23 and representations received from Councillor Spalding and response from Highways. This is the proposed site. It's bounded by Ratcliffe Highway and Fenn Street. Things to point out here are the houses to the north of Fenn Street here, the industrial estate and the Fenn Conservation Project, and also the housing estate of Bellwood Court here. This is that view in aerial street view. And then the photos from the site. This is looking from Ratcliffe Highway across the site. There's those properties fronting Fenn Street, industrial units, and then further down here you've got the boundary treatment with Bellwood Court, and you can just see a glimpse of the houses through there. And in the foreground of those is the overflow car park, which is to be retained in this part of the scheme. And this photos again is across the site from Ratcliffe Highway with the former St Mary's Who Church in the background, which you'll see later has affected the layout of the application. This site, this is the drainage ditch adjacent the site. Members will be aware public consultation and representation from the Parish Council have raised concerns about the impact of the site could have on the flooding risk on the area. The application was supported by a flood risk assessment and a drainage strategy which was considered acceptable by both the lead local flood authority and the lower Medway Internal Drainage Board, subject to further details which were secured by conditions 8, 9 and 18. These photos on Fenn Street itself, you note that the public footpath ends here, and there's no public footpath on this side of the road. The application would offer a connection through the site to aid pedestrian movements. So to the principle of the site, the application is designated countryside under the local plan, but has no landscape designation. It's severed from the surrounding countryside by the housing to the north, and the industrial and residential to the east, and then the road network on the south and west. The site is grade 2 agricultural land, but it's not considered to be a sufficient size and scale to be detrimental to either local or national agricultural production. With regards to services, there is access to Bradfield garages further down here. However, it is noted that it's probably provide only a top-up shop at best, and it's likely residents will be reliant on cars. The applications propose some mitigation to overcome this with Section 106 contribution to bus services, the introduction of footpaths through the site, and also connecting footpaths, which I'll demonstrate later in the presentation. On this slide, I've also put recent planning applications on the side here, which have recently had decisions. Number one is the Newlands Farm scheme, which was 4 dwellings. This was refused for an unsustainable location and dismissed at appeal. Number 2 is number 5, Bellwood Court, and again, this was refused and upheld at appeal. Sorry, dismissed at appeal. And number 3 is Fenn Farm, which was for 4 units, and this was refused and dismissed at appeal. You should note as well also that there's a approval from 2004 on the Hollies, which had 35 dwellings, and this was approved due to because of it would outweigh this harm. So if you look at the proposed site itself, the existing access to the overflow car park, which is here and to be retained, is altered to provide the spine road to the development. The new access has suitable vision displays which is considered acceptable in highways terms, and the parking provision meets standards throughout the site. Development consists of a mixture of 2-storey properties, including detached, semi-detached and terrace properties, which all meet the National Internal Space Standards and standards for size of gardens. As you can see, there's a green corridor on the northwest side of the site, and this will aid views across the site from either side of the countryside, and it would also allow views of the church on the public rights of way further just outside of the shot of this plan. So all of this is considered to assist and minimise the harm and development in the countryside, which will lessen over time as the landscaping proposal matures. And this shows the mix of the site. The blue is 3-bed properties, the yellow is 2-bed properties, and these orange ones are 1-bed maisonettes. And this shows the tenure. The red is market and the blue is affordable. And this is the landscape plan, which I've put in, shows a bit more detail of the open space. So you've got suds features, wildflower meadow here, and wildflower meadow here, and a leap play area here, which further details are secured by condition. These next few slides are street scenes of the proposal. So this is AA, which is on this map as along here, which you see fronting the Ratcliffe Highway. And these two here are a barn conversion style terrace properties. Then the next one you've got here is section BB, which is this along here, going from the Spine Road, and then these properties fronting the open space. And then C is along this line here, and you've got the affordable units going across, and that's the side of those the barn conversions you see here. And then the final one is going across the rest of the Spine Road, facing towards the overflow car park, and you see a mixture of materials there. And this further street scene is the same location, but looking back towards Ratcliffe Highway. So the application proposes additional highway works, which is covered by that condition 23 mentioned earlier. They include new speed bumps, relocations of bus stops, widening landing areas for those bus stops, and include the pedestrian links into the network. So you can see here the footpath runs along, go along the shared access here, and then footpaths, and there's that connection path here. And they're also proposing an infill connection opposite Pearl Lodge here, which would aid movement to Bradfield's garage. So these are the CGIs of the scheme. These are the properties fronting the green space, and then you can see peeking into the development behind. And these are the CGIs of those barn conversion type buildings along that you see from Ratcliffe Highway. So, in conclusion, members, as you've seen in the report, this is on a balanced decision, and officers consider that the provision of 44 houses, including affordable provision, and also should note condition 1 has approved an 18-month implementation instead of 3 years, so the housing will come forward earlier to help with our 5-year land supply situation. So that was considered it would overcome the impact on the countryside, especially with the sensitive layout, that green corridor, the 2-storey nature of the dwellings, and rural design, and the fact that the landscape impact will reduce as the proposed landscape matures. Secondly, overcome the loss of the agricultural land due to the size of it and the fact that it's severed by the roads. And then finally, obviously, it's unsustainable location, the number of units is also considered to outweigh the harm with that affordable provision and that quicker provision. It's noted that those other appeal decisions were a lot smaller number of units, and therefore in those situations they didn't tilt the balance. There's more units here which tilts that balance, and ultimately the officers have recommended this application for approval on the planning balance, subject to conditions, including that amended condition in the supplementary agenda and the completion of the Section 106 agreement. Thank you.
Thank you, Tom. Now over to you, Councillor Spalding. You have 5 minutes to speak.
Thank you. First of all, we're missing documents. No additional reptile survey, no pre-application documents, and the traffic surveys submitted well in time for representation on the planning portal are missing. Members have not had them. Now, I'll deal very briefly with the surveys. What we've got is an Esquire survey set up where traffic would go slow. In fact, their survey, notwithstanding that, there's over 5,000 instances of people in over the speed limit in 1 week. The report's quite dinky. There are 2 others. There's one of them, and I know which one I prefer. Now, Highways have not considered the additional 2 reports. The Road Safety Audit did not consider the additional 2 reports either. But let's go back to St Mary Hoo, a parish village of less than 100 homes, set over 900 hectares. This proposal is for 44 homes in less than 2.5 hectares. Why is it still a lovely place out there? Because time and again, this council has refused planning permission. Not only that, every appeal has been dismissed. There are 10 of them, relevant applications. The planning officer in his report mentions 3, and he leaves out the most recent one, the one refused just a year ago. He refers to them as minor schemes of 1 to 4 dwellings, but he's mistaken. In one of the ones he lists, we've got 4 4-beds, 1 3-bed, 1 1-bedroom flat, 2 detached blocks. And I'll remind you about these. September 2023, refused. January 01, refused. Appeal, dismissed. April 2010, January 14, July 18, all refused. We got onto the interesting ones. December 2018, December 19, March 21, February 2023, and May the same year. All refused and all had appeals dismissed. The last 2 appeals dismissed in January and February this year after site visits. The last 5 are relevant. Let's go into planning terms. Local plan was out of date. MPPF paragraph 11D comes into place. A presumption in favour of development unless adverse impact outweighs benefits as a whole. In each appeal, the inspector found the adverse impacts taken as a whole so considerable, so devastating, presumption was outweighed. And when referring to the local plan policy, one inspector said, although they're 16 years old, I consider the policies relevant. They carry significant weight. Referring to BNE 25, which says, development in the countryside will only be permitted if it maintains, enhances character and meaner functioning of the countryside and offers access by a range of transport modes and does not result in volumes of traffic that would damage rural amenity. This is a car-dominated scheme. Let me also remind you of current council policy. The council will resist development which will result in damage to the amenity of people occupying property close to development, and new development is expected to be in keeping with the character of surrounding countryside. In each appeal, inspector found contrary to BNE 25. Now, if the adverse impacts for 4 homes is devastating, this application of 44 is going to be off the scale. But the planning office says that's okay because we get 50 grand to magically transform the bus service overnight. The benefit of 44 homes towards a housing target outweighs everything. Since when was that a justification? We can get those 44 homes elsewhere. The call for sites came in at 30,000. We need 20,000. Fenn Corner's not even in option 1 in Regulation 18. I would show you that, but I dropped it earlier. There you go. Nothing has changed in that area since those last 2 appeals were dismissed. The planning officer's report gives his opinion. A report, I suggest, is flawed for reasons aforementioned. I'm the ward councillor. My opinion, who is out there every day, is different. This is going to be car-dominated. Bad air quality issues, however you try and do it. No safe access to local amenities. Just read the planning reports previously. Not keeping in local surrounding neighbourhood amenity. Adverse impact on existing quality of life. Unsustainable. Completely unsustainable. Now, if any member is thinking about approving this, don't stay silent. Press your microphone and say something. Don't put your hand up at the end. Tell us exactly how 44 homes towards a target of 20,000 outweighs the overwhelming, unsustainable nature of this car-dominated development. Press your microphone. Tell all those people behind me, those people that are watching at home, exactly how and why you think 6 planning inspectors in the past have got it wrong. The application doesn't work. What might work? Something similar to Bellwood Court, say 12 build plots. Tell you what, stick a new parish council hall next to the extended car park, we might get something in keeping. Members, you only have one choice on this. Total and unanimous refusal. Madam Chair, I'm obliged. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Spalding. I now open the floor to members. Any member? Councillor Pearce.
Thank you, Chairperson, and thank you to the Ward Councillor for his contribution. I would like to start with the section 106, if I may, and come back later in the debate. £11,000 towards community facilities within the vicinity of the site. There are no community facilities in St Mary Hu. The nearest community facility is in High Housetown with the village hall, which new residents will need to drive to because they can't safely walk there. £11,000 I think could be better spent on public rights of way in terms of access to the site. £10,000 towards equipment and facilities at Grain and Strood libraries. Well, Hu Library is closer to the proposed development than Strood Library or even Grain. So something's not correct here. £14,000 towards sports improvements at Hu Sports Centre. Well, Deangate Sports is closer and it's crying out for investments, and new residents will of course still need to drive to the location. £43,000 towards green spaces within the vicinity of the development, with £2,000 of that going to Great Lines Heritage Park in Gillingham. How does sending money to Gillingham help with the sustainability of a development in St Mary Hu? This money would be better spent at Deangate again, which residents will need to pass on their way in their cars. There's also money towards, potential money towards SEND education, which is special educational needs, but this can be spent anywhere in the Medway town. Surely any SEND money should be spent on the peninsula, and I understand there's potentially a new school that might open in Stoke, a SEND school, and that should go towards that. £37,000 towards health, which won't go far in terms of health provision for local people. That's half a doctor's salary, or even less. There is £3,000 towards public rights of way, but that won't go far, really, and any money needs to be ring-fenced within close proximity to the development. At the moment, it could be spent anywhere. And as mentioned, £50,000 towards bus improvements. But what is lacking from the proposed section 106, and it's an elephant in the room, a big elephant, is a contribution towards the single biggest issue in terms of sustainability on the Hu Peninsula. And this is the capacity at the Four Elms Hill bottleneck. Any vehicles from any new development joining the A228 needs to go through this bottleneck. And we all know this area is at capacity. We only have to look at the Regulation 18 evidence documents. It says it there. From my understanding, buses only attract a model shift of between 5 and 10%, meaning the vast majority of new residents will travel by car. And the officer accepts this in the report and says that it will be a car-dominated development. And therefore, I believe it's unsustainable from a starting position because of this. This proposal will only add to the problems at Four Elms Hill, and with no money going towards that issue, I can't see how the impacts from the development can be mitigated. I'm not entirely sure what we could actually do for £50,000 for buses, particularly what is the longevity of this contribution? How far will this money go? And what can it actually be spent on, taking into account that buses are run by the private sector and have to be commercially viable? How long will how many years will this money, make a difference? So the proposed section 106, looking at it, doesn't make the proposed development sustainable in my view, and doesn't mitigate the impacts from the proposal. Thank you, Chairperson. I'd like to come back later, but I'll leave it there because there's quite a bit there that I've spoken on. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Pearce. Councillor Filmer?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Quite a bit what I was going to say has been covered. The extension to the footpath from Pearl's Lodge, I better declare interest. It's actually Bradford's garage, which is primarily a petrol filling station, not a shop. It does sell things, but it does MOTs and work. So I am involved in that with my family. But what I'd like to talk about really is Fenn Street. Now, over the years, Councillor Budd from St Mary's Parish, we've worked very hard on trying to reduce the speed. That road is the main road going to All Hallows Caravan Park, Bourne Leisure, and it gets very busy at certain times of the year. Trying to control the speed there is, we've put up different cameras and bits and pieces over the years, and we've done a bit at St Mary's Cottages, but it's not very easy to do. Now, where I'm a bit concerned on this is my understanding regarding highways is it's fine to have a footpath round the actual site. How do they cross the A228? There's no way that that footpath will be a destination unless you're going to the zoo. But actually getting anywhere, cycling or walking, I think the footpath is not treating the problem of crossing the A228. So based on, as it's been said, a smaller development like Bellwood Court would fit in very well there, but 44 houses, it's going to be car driven, and the buses out there, £50,000 will go absolutely nowhere, so I'm not mindful at all on this one. Thank you.
Councillor Jones.
Thank you very much, Chair. Just some brief comments. I really feel that members have got to make up their minds on the application which is in front of us. I've seen the history of what has happened on the site, but the fact that one housing unit or 4 housing units or whatever may have been turned down in the past, there may have been totally unsuitable design aspects to those. You could get a scheme where you've got, you're presented with 44 units, which is well designed and can be accommodated within the site, and I'm inclined to think that this is. Just on the points that Councillor Pearce is raising about the Section 106, for the benefit of members of the public present and those who might be listening to the Planning Committee this evening, there's an extensive consultation goes on between the Planning Department and various departments within the council, other departments such as those dealing with community facilities and libraries and sports and leisure facilities and that sort of thing. I mean, I don't know the detail of what is needed in the area, but that is why we have officers who are able to comment on these matters. And for instance, the education contribution would be based on 2 miles because that would be the primary school journey to school, or primary age children journey to school. So that is why that is in there. Just to, if I may, correct the councillor on the question of health facilities. The health facilities listed here are not to pay for a doctor's salary, therefore towards extension, refurbishment or upgrading of premises. And the only plea I would make in terms of that to our officers, to our planning officers, to make sure it happens, because there have been occasions in the past where the health facilities infrastructure that is needed for developments have been very slow coming on board. So I would ask our officers to make best endeavours in discussions with the NHS to ensure that that's realised. But it's not, as Councillor Pearce has said, a contribution to a doctor's salary, if I understood him correctly. So for those reasons, from the point of view of the fact that I think it's a good design, the traffic calming measures, the recommendation for which has been amended and improved, and the Section 106 monies that are coming forward at this present time, Chair, I'm inclined to think I'd be likely to support the application.
Thank you, Councillor Jones. Any other member? Councillor Etheridge.
Thank you for allowing me to speak, and thank you to the officers for the report, and also to my colleagues who spoke out on this and the ward councillor. I tend to agree with my colleagues and the ward councillor that this is a totally unsustainable site. But let's just think of the families that are going to live here. They are basically imprisoned here. There's nowhere for them to go unless they want to go and see a second-hand country park that's been upgraded to be called a zoo. There is absolutely nowhere for them to go in terms of public transport. There's absolutely nowhere for them to go either by walking or cycling. As stated quite categorically, this is a car-dominated site. So any families here with their children and everything else are going to be going absolutely nowhere. And if that's what you want to condemn these families to, then good on you. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Galvin.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I believe this is a finely balanced application. Yes, there are implications of it encroaching into what in the past has been countryside. But we've got to look at the overall picture. And the overall picture is, in Britain, we have not built enough homes for people for the last 40 or 50 years. We have far too many people in their 30s, some of them starting a new family, living in their parents' bedrooms. We are drastically short of accommodation. I believe the 10 years on this development go a good step towards that sort of provision, because the developer could have put in an application for 6 or 7, 8, 4 or 5 bedroomed houses. I think they would have been extremely popular, and they would have probably made a lot more out of the development. I know that there's a lot of opposition here, but, and certainly the ward councillor has spoken passionately and well on the subject, but I think on balance, we've got to look at that bigger picture. And those people who are living in their 30s who cannot afford to buy a home, the ratio of earnings to price of house, average earnings to house prices here in Medway is now 8.5. That is a huge barrier for our young people and not so young people to get over. And when people are well into their 30s before they're buying, or 40s, before they can afford to buy their own home, that is not an acceptable situation for us as a society. So I will be supporting this tonight. I do understand the views, and I respect the views against it, but I think we've got to take that balanced view and look at the bigger picture. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Galvin. Councillor Field.
Thank you, Chairperson. I completely want to affirm what Councillor Galvin just said just then. Yesterday on Kent Online, we saw the statistic 818 children in Medway are in temporary accommodation. Think of that. 1 in 78 children in Medway are in temporary accommodation. These are 44 plots, 44 houses. It won't solve everything. Obviously, most of it will be market, but every little helps. Every little helps. And I think, obviously, as people rightly say, this isn't the most sustainable transport location. There are about 8 buses a day that go there, and 50,000 might add into, a few more and push it towards an hourly service. But we just really do need to acknowledge we're in a housing crisis, and I think this is a well-balanced application that considers particularly looking at the SUD schemes to ensure that we mitigate the impacts of surface runoff here. But I think that we need to consider, and I thank everyone who's come here to put their point of view, but there's a bigger group out there of people whose voices aren't really heard and represented in these, and I really think that we have to consider that in this context, and I will be voting for this tonight.
Thank you, Councillor Field. Councillor Hammond-Deshay.
Thank you very much. Can I get some clarity just regarding this notion of no more than 50% of the development shall be approved, shall be occupied under the Section 278 works? Are we saying after 22 houses have been built, all the traffic calming measures are in place? And what sort of calming metrics are you going to be using to agree that the traffic calming measures have been successful before you continue to build? Or are you saying that irrespective, that once the traffic calming measures are in place and the footpath extension is in place, you're going to continue building the remaining? I just want to know, have some clarity on that.
It simply means that, yeah, all those works on Ratcliffe Highway where they're putting in the Dragon's Teeth and changing the speed restrictions outside the site would have to all be complete before it's permissible for the, as you say, 23rd house is permitted to be occupied.
Okay, and would that be commonly shared in terms of the data that's been done before you continue to build? So I just want assurances that we're building in accordance to the criteria that all these measures are going to be in place and are working,
Yeah.
and you've got the data coming back in to support that before. Because when people are seeing buildings coming up, they don't know the project plan as it were. So I just want some reassurance.
I suppose it will be the works on. Do you have the highways plan available? So the work outside the site. So it's not a monitoring scheme. It's not the sort of scheme which is going to be calculating people's speeds and reviewing that over time. It is traffic calming in terms of changing the layout of the highway to better encourage people to drive slower.
Okay, and have you got a more stringent breakdown of those traffic calming measures that are currently not in there now that are going to be put in place?
I mean, the scheme that's up there is going to be reviewed through further road safety audits following following determination. There may be slight changes, but it's not expected to change much from what's on the screen.
Okay, no, thank you.
Councillor Peake.
Thank you, Chair. I will start by saying I admit this is confusing, but I actually think stating what is actually something really obvious actually helps here. When we are presented by the applicants, obviously they're going to present it in a way that makes it look all very reasonable and all the questions have been answered and it looks very convincing. Then you hear the ward councillor and you get the complete opposite. I also will state something else that's really obvious. If I lived there, I imagine I'd be against it. However, that's actually kind of the point. We couldn't have applications just going to people that live there for obvious reasons. That is not a criticism. I'm just saying it's human nature. We all have to remember that whether we support this or not, it's got to be purely on planning basis. It can't be because it's popular. It literally can't be. I know politically that makes sense, but we are not allowed to. So unless we change the law, the legal guidance, we can't do it just because we don't like something. We've got to have specific reasons. So I'm looking for assistance, and I do apologise to officers that ask you to repeat yourselves. On the application, they claimed that there will be significant public transport. It's been inferred that's a load of nonsense. Can you give us your opinion on that again? It's also been claimed there's going to be a massive traffic increase. Now, again, I can only judge by my experience. I've only ever lived in built-up areas. The idea of 44 housing causing such chaos does not resonate with me. But then that's down to what I'm used to. I'm not used to living in the countryside, so obviously I've got different experiences. So can I have your guidance on that as well? There's also been the claim that the SO money is not adequate at all. So again, can you please flesh that one out for me? Thank you.
Councillor Pearce.
Thank you, Chairperson, for letting me come back. I would like to compare the proposed development to the Hollies, which is off Ratcliffe Highway. And I think there are differences between the two. The Hollies was built by the applicant, and it's recognised that the applicant does build attractive houses and attractive developments, but that's beside the point. The access for the Hollies is straight onto the A228 main road. This road is wide and includes footpaths in both directions. You can walk and head towards Charnel Street and Hoo, and you can also go in the other direction towards Bradford's Garage. Whereas the access for the proposed development in question is onto Fenn Street, which is a narrow and very busy country lane with no footpath provision for the vast majority of the road. The part of Fenn Street where the proposed development wants access to is very busy itself and contains a number of junctions close together, such as Newlands Farm Road, the Zoo Overflow car park, which is literally directly opposite, the business park, the Fenn pub, and the main zoo car park itself. Fenn Street is also the main route for All Hallows, as has been mentioned, including the holiday park, which does get very busy in the summer. The access for the proposed development will be sharing the same access as the Zoo Overflow car park on an already very busy stretch of a country lane with multiple junctions in this section. Paragraph 116, section C of the MPPF states the following, which is national policy. Applications for development should create places that are safe, secure and attractive, which minimise the scope for conflicts between pedestrians, cyclists and vehicles. And I think that policy is relevant here, particularly in this junction area. I'm not convinced there won't be an unacceptable highways impact on Fenn Street in terms of safety, but also in terms of capacity. I believe there will be conflict between pedestrian cyclists and particularly vehicles in this area. The Hollies is also obscured quite well, and you wouldn't even know the development was actually there unless you entered the road. This is the same with Bellwood Court, which is a self-build development site next to the proposed development. The proposed development is also too highly dense. It's high density for the plot. Particularly, it's not in keeping with the surrounding area of St Mary Hoo, particularly St Mary Hoo. With the Hollies, because it's in high house, so the density is more acceptable. This means the proposal will stick out on the landscape and urbanise, particularly this Fenn Street and A228 junction. I'd like to talk about the tilted balance. The officer's report accepts this is a car-dominated development. I'm concerned particularly with the sentence within the report that states, quote, consequently, the benefits, most notably the provision of up to 44 new dwellings with 11 affordable housing towards the council's 5-year housing land supply, is considered to demonstrably outweigh the harm of a car-dominant location. I'm concerned because this argument could be used to support any proposed development of any size on the Hoo Peninsula. In short, Chairperson, basically what the argument being put forward is that the benefits of the housing outweighs the impacts from the car dominance. And this is particularly relevant in terms of transport capacity, and 4MC as mentioned before. National planning policy also dictates that planning decisions have to apply a presumption in favour of sustainable development. The key word here is sustainable. It's not a presumption in favour of development generally. Regardless of the 30,000 housing target that we've got imposed on us by national government, and also what we assess as our local housing need, there isn't a presumption in favour of development generally. It has to be sustainable. And from the outset, as I've explained previously, I think from a baseline position, this proposal isn't sustainable, and there's attempts to try and make it sustainable. I'm not convinced the Section 106 mitigations, the design and access particularly, and also the density overcome the fundamental sustainability issue of the proposed development being car dominant. The starting position is unsustainable. I believe the adverse impacts from granting permission for what is proposed would significantly and demonstrably outweigh the benefits. Therefore, I can't support the recommendation. Also, Chairperson, I believe a deferral and a site visit would be beneficial for the committee for two reasons, which I think are reasonable. Firstly, so that all of these documents that have been referred to by the ward member can be scrutinised by members and taken into account before an informed decision can be made. And also, secondly, so members of the committee who aren't familiar with the location, and that's not a criticism, can see firsthand the situation on the ground, particularly with regards to Fenn Street. I would like to propose a deferral and site visit at the end of the debate and before we go to a vote, please. Thank you.
Right, I'm now going to hand over to Dave Harris, Chief Planning Officer.
Chairman, thank you. Chairperson, sorry, thank you very much. And I appreciate that Councillor Pearce has proposed something. It's not been seconded as yet, but before it's put to whether that's seconded, there are just some things that I would like to say in conclusion to the debate. I think first of all, I think Councillor Golvin has summed up things incredibly well in terms of it's a balanced case. But I can also understand what the residents have and their concerns and the points put forward by Councillor Spalding as ward councillor and other councillors in relation to against the scheme. We can see that the site is here, and as the case officers explained, you've got that development of a number of detached homes just in there. You've got the industrial estate in here. You've got the zoo hub in there, and opposite you've got some linear development. But St Mary's Who is quite a different character. You've got the scatter of properties here. You've got some scatter properties there. Further up here, you've got a triangle of relatively more modern properties. I think they were late 80s, early 90s that they were constructed in terms of the triangular development up there. But it's very sporadic development. So again, I can understand the point that Councillor Spalding was saying in terms of that character, and the residents have said as well in terms of that character. Having said all of that, our local plan dates back to 2003. Celebrated is the wrong word to use. Its 21st birthday. It's out of date, and the policies within it, which relate to housing land supply, are irrelevant. They cannot be used if they restrict housing land supply. The result of that is that over the last 15 years, we've been subject to speculative applications, which members have had to determine on each one on their merits. Now, members, a few more things I'd like to say. Firstly, I think it was Councillor Field who said that we're in a housing crisis. We absolutely are. In 40 years of planning, I've never known the housing crisis that we're in now, in Medway, in Kent, in the southeast, in England. I've never witnessed this sort of housing crisis in 40 years. There is also an affordable housing crisis, and I think everybody will recognise that in Medway there is an affordable, people affording homes is a big issue for us. Now that crisis, Councillor Field has spoken about that the figure quoted this morning, 818 children in temporary accommodation in Medway. We have over 200 children homeless in Medway. Councillor Golvin has talked about the fact that the average age of the first-time buyer is 37 years old. All of this relates to the housing crisis. Now, going to the NPPF, the National Planning Policy Framework, we're required to have a 5-year housing land supply. All councils are required to have a 5-year housing land supply. We haven't. Ours is about 3.6 years. So if I could take a quote from a barrister that we use very often in planning appeals. In terms of refusals, I'm then going into an appeal in a public inquiry, football analogy, already 1-0 down. I've then got to argue that despite the 5-year housing land supply or lack of, there are other things which mitigate an application being refused. As Councillor Pearce has said, because of that, the presumption in favour of sustainable development applies, and he quite rightly highlights the word sustainable, and that's really, really important, and I will go through that in more detail. Councillor Pearce has also referred to the fact that in the local plan, we've got a housing target, and it's not political because the housing target differs very little from this government to the previous government. It is 1,658 dwellings a year we need to provide. We've never got anywhere near that, which is why we haven't got a 5-year housing land supply. It does mean that we've got to provide just over 28,000 homes over the local plan period up to 2041. If we take out the sites that already have planning permission, that means we, Medway Council, have got to find sites for 22,500 homes between now and 2041. We can't hide that, members. That's going to have a big impact on, and all parts of Medway are going to need to contribute to that. Councillor Spalding said that this site is not in option 1 in the recent consultation. It's absolutely right, it's not in option 1. It is in options 2, and it is in the preferred option in option 3. But that should be given limited weight. It's a consultation. There's nothing set in stone in that. So although it was in 2 of the options, that has limited weight. So what is sustainable development according to the NPPF? It refers to 3 arms: social, economic, and environmental. So in relation to social, delivery of housing, that should be given significant weight. And in that respect, Mr. Stubbs has advised that the applicants have agreed to start this development quickly, i.e. within 18 months rather than 3 years, so helping deliver the homes. The delivery of affordable homes should also be given significant weight. And in this respect, despite the fact that there are significant difficulties at the moment in delivering affordable homes, particularly through Section 106, in this instance, there is an RP, a registered provider, identified, signed up, and will deliver on this site using grant funding. They will deliver 11 homes for affordable rent, and they are the 2- and 1-bedroom units. So the delivery of homes, and particularly the delivery of affordable homes, should be given significant weight in the application determination process. In terms of economic, there will be employment during construction. The added advantage here is that we have an SME delivering, a small medium provider, delivering the homes on site. So that means that local people, local labour, local suppliers will be used in that. So that will help with the economy. Once the houses are delivered, that will increase spend in the local area post-occupation, and again will help the local economy. So that benefit there should be given moderate weight. There is reference in the report in various places to the impact on the zoo. I need to emphasise that should be given limited to negligible weight in this process. The fact that the applicant has said that they will use the money to help keep the zoo going is actually irrelevant, members, or should be given negligible weight. The homes will be permanent. The zoo could close next year, 5 years' time, but the homes are permanent. So you shouldn't give that aspect any serious weight at all. The highway mitigation that George has commented on should be given moderate weight. Councillor Pearce has talked about highway safety aspects and about capacity on the Four Elms roundabout. I would urge members' caution here. We've got a highways report submitted by the applicants. It's been considered by our highways officers and our highways team. They've found the highways aspects acceptable. If members were to, by observation or whatever, by listening to local residents or whatever, say that that's not acceptable and refuse it, there are recent examples where an inspector has said, you've got 2 qualified highway consultants saying the same thing. You members, by observations, have disagreed with that. You've got no evidence backed up by a highways official to justify it. I would strongly advise not following that process, because you not only will lose an appeal on that, but you'll lose costs on it. Now, I'm not saying that this application is not finely balanced, but I would just urge caution on the highway safety aspect. And that's not recognising the residents there laughed at the comment I'm saying. I drove up to All Hallows on Tuesday night. I was going 40 miles an hour in the 40-mile-an-hour limit, and a car driven by a local person went past me, must have been going 70 miles an hour at least. So I recognise the concerns from local residents. I'm just saying in planning terms, in national planning policy and local planning policy, you've got to justify it and you've got to substantiate that there is harm which would mean a refusal of planning permission. And there aren't qualified highway consultants who would back up that reason for refusal. In relation to Four Elms Roundabout, I do understand Councillor Pearce's comment on there. We all know that there are lots of junctions, lots of roads all the way through around Medway, which are highly congested, and I completely acknowledge that. And at peak times, Four Elms Roundabout is a difficult one. Our highway consultants have come to the conclusion that 44 homes would not justify a refusal of planning permission based on that impact on Four Elms Roundabout. That's not to say that there isn't a need to do something with it. And in relation to the Uniper application, there are proposals to improve that roundabout. In terms of the Section 106, again, I completely understand what Councillor Pearce is saying. In terms of libraries, very happy to include who in that. I think that's a really good point that Councillor Pearce has made. In terms of the sports improvements, where we say Hoob Sports Centre, we could put in there and/or Deangate. In relation to the green spaces contribution, the reference to Great Lines, completely again understand the difficulties that members have with the 5% towards the Great Lines. It's in our policy, it's in our adopted developer contributions guide, but if members take the view that they want the 100% to go to green space improvements on the peninsula, that's within your power to do that. In relation to the SEND education, the proposal is for contributions for primary education within 2 miles of the development. So there are primary schools within 2 miles, or SEND education within Medway. If the Lower Stoke SEND comes forward, it could go towards that, Councillor Pearce, and that's a valid point to raise. So that's in terms of economics. In relation to environmental, yes, the site is in the countryside. We can see it is in the countryside here. But it's not within a site of any designated landscape importance. It's not within an area of local landscape importance. It's not within a special landscape. It's not in an area of outstanding natural beauty. It's not in the green belt. In terms of agricultural land, it's grade 2, but it's not in agricultural use, and it's never likely to be in agricultural use. Design and layout. As I said, I do recognise the character of St Mary Hoo. But if we look at the site here and that relationship with those adjacent properties, where it's bounded by industrial units there and the pub, it's bounded by some residential here. We've got roads on these two sides, and across, on the other side of the road, we've got the linear development. In addition to that, my team have negotiated really hard in relation to the landscape quality and the design of it. So we've got this landscaping, as Mr. Stubbs has said, around the outside here, which will help soften the development and over time will help to make it more acceptable. And that was a view taken by the inspector in dealing with a very sensitive landscape site out at East Hill and Capstone, where an inspector took the view that the landscaping and maturing over time was something that we needed to consider. As Tom says, the landscaping to the front helps to protect those views of the church. The other aspect in terms of design I wanted to reflect on is the fact that this isn't a volume house builder coming forward with a scheme of anywheresville, which we see with volume house builders, where they build the same product wherever it is in the country. This is an SME who've designed this specifically for this location, and there's been a lot of discussion with my urban design officer and my team to try and get this design appropriate for this rural setting. And we need to give moderate weight to the design aspects. Now, I then want to come on to the point that Councillor Pearce was emphasising, and I totally understand this, which is the traditional view in sustainability. So the MPPF is about social, economic and environmental. The traditional view in sustainability is exactly what Councillor Pearce and others have talked about. This is a car-dominant scheme. We can't odds that. We can't try and cover that up. It is a car-dominant proposal. It is a distance from services, as members have pointed out. The Bradford's garage has limited benefit. I think Councillor Filmer has said it's a petrol station. It does serve maybe, I don't know, a newspaper, a loaf of bread, some milk, something, maybe something like that at the very most. But it can, that should be carried limited weight. In my discussion with local residents in relation to the local plan, and I've been out speaking to residents out on the peninsula, a lot of residents, a lot of residents have said to me, there needs to be a retail store out on the peninsula somewhere to cater for their needs, and Bradfield's just doesn't fit the bill for that. The section 106 for improved bus services, I think Councillor Filmer summed that up. The 50 grand will have limited benefit. It's a car-dominated scheme. It will have limited benefit there. There are some pedestrian improvements to this through the site. There will be local materials used in the construction of these. There will be reduced water consumption. There will be air source heat pumps. So it's in terms of construction and future energy use, it is a very sustainable development in that respect. In terms of location, the car domination, no, I can't argue that it's sustainable in that respect. So yes, the development will have an impact, but to meet our housing requirements, there will be impact wherever homes do go. As I've said in presentations, 22,500 homes is like 15 Rochester riversides. So that can't be hidden. We need to select appropriate sites. We do feel that this site is acceptable, and the SME aspect has big benefits. So we have applied the tilted balance. In terms of those other schemes that were referred to quite rightly by Councillor Spalding in terms of the appeals, in those instances, because the delivery of homes was very limited, the inspector didn't feel that the delivery there outweighed the harm. In this instance, with 44 homes, in this instance with a good quality design, in this instance with 11 affordable homes, in this instance with the SME and the economic benefits and so on, we feel the tilted balance now turns in favour of the scheme. I do understand it's difficult and it's balanced, but it's one that we feel is acceptable, hence a recommendation. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Dave. Councillor Peake.
Thank you for that. That was very useful. Can I just make sure I understood you correctly? You accepted that the money to be given to public transport doesn't really have much impact because it is going to be such a car-dominated scheme?
Yeah, Chairperson, thank you. Yeah, there is £50,000. It will go to improving the inadequate bus service that is out there. And residents, if I was to say it was anything better than inadequate, I think residents would quite rightly shout me down. It will go towards improving it. There is a lot more work to do. If we're going to see further development out on the peninsula and other places in Medway, there's a lot more work that this administration need to do with the public transport providers to improve that. 50 grand will help, but it will still be a car-dominated scheme.
Okay. And sorry, Chair, just one more. Obviously, in terms of what there is there already, 44 homes, and there may be some homes that's big enough to get a two-car family. This is a significant increase for what there is there already. Well, I was trying to say that in the overall scheme of things, as somebody who's used to living where there is traffic, is it legitimate to ask you, the officers, your estimate of how much traffic, not in relation to how much is already there, but just in broad terms, is this deemed to be likely to be? The reason why I'm saying this, there's been statements made that imply it's going to be, really, really heavy, maybe traffic jams. I don't know what they're actually really saying, because they're just blanket statements. So I wanted to get your opinion, please.
Chairperson, I might bring George in a second. In 44 homes, yes, there will be some which will be two cars. There might even be more. If you've got two adults and a take Councillor Galvin's point, you could have someone of 30 years old in there as well as a child. So there could be three cars. It does provide car parking to serve the needs. Not everybody will be arriving and leaving at the same time. To refuse the application, we would need to show severe harm, that's the words that are used in the MPPF, in terms of the road capacity. We're not able to show that. George, do you want to come in on that?
Yeah, thanks. The The assessment in terms of the amount of car trips that the applicant has submitted, which we've reviewed and we think is robust and in line with industry standards, shows that the maximum number of vehicle trips in any 1 hour period would be 20, which is approximately one vehicle moving every 3 minutes, which is not particularly perceptible in terms of most highways in terms of the sensitivity of junctions. So, yeah, one trip every 3 minutes at a maximum hour.
Okay, Councillor Etheridge.
Thank you for letting me come back. To answer your question, Councillor Peake, we're not looking at 2 or 3 cars per hour coming from this side. What you've got to take into consideration is from April to October, you have literally thousands of cars using that road going to the All Hallows Caravan Park. Not necessarily people who are residents staying there, but they're guests as well, and also they do day tickets. So any visitor on a Wednesday, Thursday and Friday can also visit. So we're not talking just a few cars, you're talking thousands.
Okay, was there any other member? Councillor Pearce?
Sorry, Chairperson, I've just to, if there's no other members that want to speak, just to formally propose a deferral and site visit for the reasons explained previously. Thank you.
Councillor Barrett.
Thank you, Chairperson. I don't travel up that way very regularly myself, but I'm aware that there's various different sort of styles of road, from dual carriageway to almost a country lane in that sort of area. And with this sort of development, it's obviously going to be families with children that would be school age, wishing to attend school. Whether there is a sort of a school within 3 miles or whether it's within 30 metres, I would consider there wasn't a safe route for the child to travel or any person away from that particular development. Thank you.
Councillor Peake.
Thank you, Chair. Whilst I already stated that we cannot make decisions on planning just to be popular or whatever, but it is also equally really important to listen. So for me, part of that listening process, an area that I admit I do not know that very well. I've got no idea what my chair or the rest of the group thinks, but I would actually like to second Councillor Pearce's request for site visit, just because it would help me, because it does bring it alive.
Okay, thank you. Right, so we're going to go to vote then for a site visit. Over to you, Councillor Jones.
I'm not quite sure what I'm supposed to be moving, Chair, because I'm opposed to a site visit. But we need to have justification on this committee that the planning presentation hasn't told us everything that we need to know, and the planning presentation has been quite expansive. We may not agree, or some members may not agree with the presentation or the points that were made in the presentation, but it's given us a very clear picture. My inclination would be that we don't need a site visit, but let's...
Sorry, Councillor Jones, I'll just go straight to the vote now, thank you. Oh, sorry, Councillor Etheridge, before we go to the vote.
Yes, please. I think that comment was totally inappropriate. We've had applications for site visits before. Nobody's ever tried to object on the grounds of the planning presentation wasn't good enough. And I think you should withdraw that comment. And I'm more than happy to support Councillor Peake to say we should have a site visit. Even more importantly, if it's approved, I'll suggest every member tries getting there by bus and they see just how bad it is.
Right, those for the site visit.
That's 9, Chair.
Those against? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. That's 6, Chair. Okay, thank you. The application is therefore deferred for a site visit. Right, members, we will now carry on with the remainder of the agenda. So we're moving on to agenda item 6, planning application, Edwards Close Play Area. Aaron Nichols will be presenting this application, so over to you, Aaron.
Thank you, Chairperson. Good evening, members. This application seeks planning permission for the demolition of an existing Scout Hall and outdoor stage and proposes the construction of a replacement multifunctional Scout Hall, and the application is being brought to committee as a result of the number of objections received. This site plan shows the application site, which is located to the north of Edward Close and to the south of Woodside in Wigmore. And this slide shows the proposed site layout, showing the application site area in red, as well as some aerial views. And this slide shows views from inside the site. Pictures 1 and 2 show the grassed area to the west of the site, whilst image 3 shows the interior of the existing hall, and image 4, 5 and 6 show the existing hall. And this slide shows the existing structure, floor plans and elevations, as well as a roof plan. And this slide shows the proposed site. The new hall is proposed to be a 2-form roof featuring a pitched roof measuring approximately 7 metres in height, with a flat roof element measuring approximately 3 metres in height, with the windows on the southern elevation of the 2-form element at a height of 3 metres, and have been designed to provide light to the proposed building without providing any overlooking into neighbouring properties. And they can be seen here on the southern elevation. And this slide shows the proposed side elevations. Along with these, the applicant has submitted the indicative materials as timber cladding for the walls, zinc cladding for the roof, double glazed aluminium windows and doors, but to ensure that the quality of the materials is appropriate, a condition requiring the submission of samples has been added. And this slide shows the proposed building with an internal rendering of the main hall building. And this slide shows the existing building, which is outlined in red, and the proposed building outlined in black. And then below it are building models showing the existing building and the proposed building. Thank you.
Thank you, Aaron. Over to members now. Any member? Councillor Gilbourne.
Thank you, Chair. I'll support this application. I know someone who lives on that close and talked to her recently, and she's very much in favour too, but just commented about the lighting on the walkway that runs at the front of it is a concern. But I like it because it's actually developing something in the community to be more than what's there at the moment. It's something that, as the ward councillor for the area, I'd love to see more of this sort of development, for particularly at keeping young children engaged with what's actually going on in the community, rather than having to go outside it to other parts or town centre areas. I think because it's at the back of the Howard Memorial Hall anyway, there's an existing sort of community element that goes on there, and you know, within that part of Wigmore. And I understand that some people may object just because they just suspect there could be more disruption or more noise because there's more things going to happen. But already it's quite a quiet area, and having the scout hall at the bottom of Edwards Close is actually quite a benefit to the wider community, not just for the people who live more closely to it. So I think on pure planning terms, but also for the community asset that it brings, I'll be supporting it.
Thank you. Any other member? Councillor Filmer.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Quite happy to support the ward member, and we should do more for community stuff like this, and the Scouts, very good cause. So happy to support this.
Thank you. Councillor Golvin.
Thank you, Madam Chair. It's a long time since I was a Boy Scout, but I can remember those days very, very fondly. I think the Scout movement and others do a great deal of good for young people's development. Often now there isn't much sort of safe things for young people to do except hang around on the streets. So I think the Scout movement in bringing this new development forward, I've got to be congratulated. And just in architectural terms, it's certainly a substantial improvement from the photographs we've just looked at. So I think it's a good thing, and I think we should give it support.
Thank you. Councillor Pearce.
Thank you, Chairperson. Yeah, I support the application, and there's a similar situation in who we've got a scout hut behind properties. It's very similar to this along Stoke Road, and they are in fact looking at refurbishment and possibly a new building or an extension. So I do understand the residents' concerns here, but going back to what the Chief Planning Officer said earlier, I think the community benefits from this are quite significant. And with something like this, you don't get the negatives as you do with development, and the pressures, mainly, well, not negatives, but the pressures that come from development, which you have to mitigate and trying to accommodate. So this is definitely weighted, I think, in favour of the application. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Pearce. Councillor Hamilton.
So I am minded to support the application, but I'd like some clarification about the lighting associated with it and the impact on nocturnal animals.
Okay, Aaron, do you want to come back on that?
Sorry, bear with me 2 seconds. I'm just going to the relevant section. So the application, sorry, bear with me. So as part of the application, we it was designed so that the lights that are existing, so at the moment to the rear of the existing structure, there's a kind of like floodlights and assorted lights to the rear, and those have all basically been angled down to not affect local wildlife, as well as not creating light that would spill into the rear amenity gardens of the properties to the north of it. As part of the application, the agent is basically looking to move the entrance from the side and the front to be more to the front, to be to the southern boundary, sorry. And along with that, they're only looking at minimal lighting along with it. And condition 12 secures that.
Councillor Pearce.
Thank you, Chairperson. Just one other point which I've just thought about is the big issues that are being raised are to do with parking and increased pressure on existing highway. But from my experience with the Scout Hut in Who, a lot of the people that use that Scout Hut walk with their children to the Scout Hut as part of the experience of, taking your children to Scouts. And the Scout Hut in Who has got limited parking, but that's not an issue. That's part of the experience of going to Scouts. You walk to the Scouts. So I don't think that will be an issue here in response to the objections that have come in. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Pearce. Any other member? No. Right, I now move over to Vice Chair, Councillor Jones.
Thank you, Chair. Move approval of this planning application with conditions 1 to 15, as outlined in the report. Thank you.
Thank you. Those for... Oh, sorry, is that seconded? Seconded. Those for...
That's 15, Chair.
The application is therefore approved. Now moving on to agenda item 7, Manor Farm Quarry. Hannah Gunner, Principal Officer, will be presenting this application. So over to you, Hannah.
Thank you, Chairperson, and good evening, members. This application is for the variation of Condition 1, which was a time limit condition on planning permission MC 20-2806, to amend the requirement of the completion of the infilling operation of the Manor Farm Barn Quarry until the 31st of December 2027. So this is an aerial photograph showing the red line. So this line shows this is the red line for the application that was originally consented in 2010, which was for the quarry infill. So this application came forward substantially in advance of the approved hybrid application of 2021, which is all detailed within the planning report under the section in relation to the wider development on site. However, just to sort of orientate members, Manor Farm Barn is here. This is the quarry with the access road that went in as part of this original 2010 application. But then the new Thinking Schools Academy, I believe it's called, Academy Trust, is located sort of in this area of the development site. So that school actually has been completed and became operational earlier this month. And I believe they've actually received pupils for years 7, 8 and 9 already. What I do want to show you is some aerial photographs of the infill itself. So this is taken from Google Earth imagery and it was actually dated from June 2020. So there's a few aspects that I just want to point out here. So like I say, this was June 2020, so 4 years ago now. And what you can see, when you came into the site sloped down, and there was also an access road around the side, and you can see this road coming in here and then coming down again towards the back of the site. And you can see the extent of the quarry cliff face here as well at the back, and you can see the extent of the quarry cliff face again here where the access road lies, and going up to the top. So if I then scroll to this next drone shot taken in May 2024, the site no longer dips down when you come into it, and what you can see is the access road, or the levels have come up as high as the access road up at this side. So that area of quarry has already been infilled. And what you can see is the levels of quarry at the quarry infill at the rear are also come up considerably high. Whilst the quarry cliff face here is still quite exposed, what you'll see is the land levels go down here. This is mainly to do with the fact that the quarry walls have to be clay-lined before filled in. So much of the infill has gone on within the sort of the main extent of the quarry to date. I do have another shot at another angle because I think it's helpful for you to see what has progression on site at this stage. So we can orientate ourselves. There's the barn. So this is the entrance into the site again. So you've got the weighbridge down here. And as you can see, the site sloped down, get my teeth in. And then you can see again the extent of the quarry walls here, and you can see the roadway coming round, and that again was of June 2020. And then if we go back to the drone shot taken earlier this year in May, again you can see the extent of the works that have gone on to date. So I think this is quite a nice indication of progression on site. Going forward, so the applicants have submitted some data to help us understand everything that's gone on site to date. So this is for a 36-month period, and it starts at June 2021 and takes us through, I want to say that's May 2024. And there's a timeline here at the top which sets out some of the factors that have sort of gone towards contributing towards the load figures that we have here. So these orange bars relate to the loads that were received during this time, and there's various issues that caused the infill loads to slow down, some of them being COVID related and restriction related, and then what we see here, as everyone is probably aware, is that Commissioners Road, which is a quarry infill site quite close, the other side of the church, was completed around this point here. So then what we have for the last 12 months, we can see the quarry infill rates at Manor Farm since the completion of the Commissioners Road. So what I just want to point out, so this red line indicates the average loads going in over that 36-month period. The blue line, however, is a more accurate figure for the last 12 months. So what we can see there is the amount of loads going in over the last 12 months since the completion of Commissioners Road. It has significantly ramped up. In terms of the date that they're applying for in order for completion, what we've been provided with is some calculations and a breakdown of those calculations so we can understand really whether or not this is achievable and realistic, I think, for want of a better term. So we can see that in terms of the void remaining, I believe this was of May, again, 2024, there was 350,000, for want of a better term, of cubic meterage to go in. So the average volume load that comes in is 15 cubic metres, and when that's compacted, that comes down to 10 cubic metres. So in terms of looking at the number of lorry loads that are required to fill the remaining void, we're looking at just shy of 35,000 movements. So those over the course of 36 months breaks down to 822 movements a month, which per day breaks down to 38. Now, when originally approved, I think the Commissioners Road one, when originally approved, was at 60 movements a day. So I feel 38 movements is a relatively achievable figure. And what I'd like to draw your attention to here is the average loads required per month is 822. Ooh, and when we look at this graph here, it's not very clear. But in the last 12 months, the average loads per month, it states there, is just over 1,000. So they've been realistic in terms of the numbers of loads coming into the site and showing how this can be achieved if they're taking 38 loads per day. But the likelihood is, and I believe they've got consent to take more than that. So I've just finished on some photographs. I was down on site last week to double check what was going on. So these just show, I was taking these top two pictures from the entrance gate itself. So you can see the land levels from the entrance gate. I keep losing this arrow. They definitely don't slope down anymore. You can see where the site does sort of slope up, but you can see where the infill hasn't occurred yet around the edges. And this lower one just shows the entrance road in and out of the site, really to demonstrate that it is kept at a good standard, and it is maintained on a regular basis, on a daily basis. So again, taken on site, what I actively saw for every vehicle coming off of the site was that the wheel washing operation was in working order and was happening. My site visit wasn't by appointment, so I'm happy to say that this was all ongoing as I arrived. Also, the road sweeper that goes up and down was actually emptying whilst I was there as well. But they also have an additional road sweeper, which is almost like an oversized tractor dustpan and brush. So they run the road sweeper operation regularly. I believe in lighter summer months, this road sweeper is maybe once a day, but as the weather gets worse, it is more frequent. But again, just to sort of annotate, this is sort of the type of lorry loads that we see coming in and the sort of soil that's deposited on site. So I will leave you just with that image there in relation to the sort of progression on site as of May. So just to conclude, the proposal to extend the time for the infill to take place is considered necessary in order to actually achieve the 2021 hybrid application coming forward. But it's also considered to be an achievable timescale that has been proposed here when looking at the calculations that have been provided. So for the reasons that I have stated, the approval of this variation is recommended for approval. Thank you.
Thank you, Hannah. We now go over to Councillor Hubbard. You have 5 minutes to speak.
Thank you for allowing me to speak. Enough is enough. I would urge the members to refuse this planning application. When compared to the housing application you considered earlier, on the face of it, this application is not controversial. But the ongoing infill of this quarry is highly controversial. The infill has been active for a very long time now, week after week, month after month, year after year. And now it's proposed to extend it for at least another 3 years, and maybe a further extension. In the representation section, there's comment from one of my residents, which states that they cannot enjoy the gardens in Partridge Lane due to the constant bleeping of bulldozers, moving soil and the crashing of lorry tailgates whilst unloading. They're sick and tired of noise and dust, and that in dry weather, properties are covered in a fine film of dust, and it's becoming detrimental to their mental health. Those comments have been echoed by other residents to Strood North and Frindsbury councillors on numerous occasions over the years. I'm aware, from what is now the completed Commissioner's Road pit, the nearby sister quarry, that as the infill raises the bottom of the quarry, the lorry and bulldozer noise, the ground vibrations and the dust getting increasingly more intense. Those elements increasingly have less distance to travel out of the quarry and into the homes of residents. With reference to the representation section, I echo the concerns raised by the Parish Council. The delays in further restoration and redevelopment of the listed Manor Farm barn are down to the elephant in the room. That is the granted outline permission of the Manor Farm housing. It is the craziest, nonsensical business plan of any housing development I've ever seen. The housing estate has to be built before the monies come available to carry out the required works in the barn. Members who attended last week's planning presentation for the Housing Estates Reserved Matters planning application are now aware that 2/3 of the housing estate, some 130 homes, has required ground level that is somewhere hanging in mid-space, well above the quarry floor. Floating housing sounds science fiction. Well, it's certainly fiction here. Will the proposed 3-year extension be long enough to raise the ground levels to the required profile? I expect not. The history of the site tells us not. When in April 21 the Planning Committee approved the further application to extend the infill to the end of this year, the developer stated that the infill will be completed within 3 years, before the end of this year. There is a very urgent need to increase the number of houses being built in Medway. I strongly suggest that the developer comes forward with an alternative housing proposal for the 2/3 of the space-hanging housing estate, and those homes be built within the quarry with access from Berwick Way. Enough is enough. For the future well-being and the welfare of my ward residents, I would urge members to refuse this application. And in addition, since you earlier deferred an application for a site meeting, there is a site meeting for members of this committee, well, some of the members of this committee and the ward members for the weekend after next. That's via the developer. I'm quite sure that that could be extended to all members of this committee and they could go and see the site rather than looking at photographs to understand the meaning of what the site is like. So I'm suggesting you might want to defer for a site meeting, but I would actually want you to refuse it.
Thank you, Councillor Hubbard. We now move over to members. Any member? Councillor Etheridge.
Thank you, Chairman. The original proposal for this, some 20 years ago, 20 years ago, was the restoration of a barn and artisan cottages surrounding the pit. That was the original proposal. So 20 years hence, we're still talking about infilling this pit, and it's not happened. So there's all sorts of things being blamed, COVID, issues with infill material. But the actual truth of the matter was, the reason the other pit was filled so quickly, because they charged half the price that these people charged for infilling their pit. Also, in terms of the increase in vehicles, was also down to this council allowing additional vehicles to go in throughout the week, extending their times, and they still didn't manage it. How they intend to guarantee, if we give them yet another extension, that they will meet that target? We've already seen from the presentation by the officer, there's an impact rate of 1.5%. I'd be interested to know from the housing or from the officers themselves, on that rate of 1.5%, how long does that soil need to settle in the pit before it can be built on? I suspect a number of years yet. So to build those houses, as stated quite clearly in the sky, of which the barn is dependent upon, I don't believe is feasibly possible within the time frame placed. I fully support the idea that we go and have a site visit, although not a member of this committee, so you can see for yourself. And as I mentioned to a couple of colleagues who sat in the presentation, to get to the bottom of the pit, you better develop some wings or have a parachute to get there, because that's how deep it is, and it has been for a long time. Thank you.
Any other member? Councillor Pearce.
Thank you, Chairperson. I'm just looking at the comments which have come in, and dust has been mentioned a few times. So correct me if I'm wrong. Is there any conditions which cover that to try and reduce that impact on residents, please? Thank you.
Chair, I can come back on a couple of the sort of issues that have been raised.
Yeah, thank you, Hannah.
In relation to noise and disturbance to the neighbouring residents, I can confirm that there are restrictions on the hours of operation that have been in place since the infill commenced. The hours of operation are restricted to between 8 o'clock in the morning and 5:30 at night, Monday to Friday, and 8:30 in the morning till 1 o'clock on Saturdays. I do actually believe that they pack up site at 4:30 in the week, and I don't believe it's operational at weekends. So in terms of hours of disturbance, they're relatively moderate. In terms of the homes coming forward as well, and the barn, whilst it's not technically related to this application, the other application, the 2021 hybrid application, does actually have triggers in place, which means that no more than 60 units can be occupied before the first stages of works are commenced on the barn, and then I believe the next trigger is 130 units and the consent is for 181. So there are triggers in place to ensure that the barn restoration and the barn works do come forward as the housing does as well. So I just wanted to sort of clarify that point. The point Councillor Etheridge made in terms of compaction and how long that it has to settle. So as with Commissioners Road, it's the same going on here. So it's actually compacted as it's laid. So as each lorry load comes in, those lorry loads are compacted as they go. They're compacted either by vibration or roller. I believe most of the time it's a roller compaction on site here. But in terms of settlement periods, technically there really isn't one required when the fill is complete. And in terms of dust management, I believe condition 22, which has been carried over from the previous consent, there is a dust management plan in place. So that should be being complied with, but obviously if members need us to just verify that that dust management plan has been complied with, then I'm more than happy to take that up. Thank you.
That's great, thank you, Hannah. Any other member? Councillor Pearce?
Thank you, Chairperson. Yeah, that would be great if we can get that clarified, just so that we can go back to residents and say that this has been enforced. To be fair, Chairperson, looking at this objectively, I don't think we've got much choice but to grant the extension, to be perfectly honest, because we are beholden to the applicant getting on with this as quickly as possible. Because nothing else can happen on that site until it's fulfilled. It's all filled up, pardon the pun. I did notice in here that there's a condition about restoration of agricultural land. So I don't know much about this application. So is it the case that it has to be filled up and then restored back to agriculture, and then a development comes forward to build on that agricultural land? Is that correct, my thinking? But yeah, I don't think we've got a choice, regardless of what's been said by the ward councillor, who I'm grateful for, and also officers. I don't think we've got a choice other than to accept the extension, because we haven't really got much of a stick to hit them with, really, for them to hurry along on it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Pearce. Councillor Golvin?
Yes, I agree with Councillor Pearce. It's disappointing that it's taking longer to do the infill, but we desperately need the land to build on. This is effectively creating new building land out of what was just a void, and I can understand that it's taken a bit longer, because certainly when I was a director of the Medway Development Company, we made a conscious decision wherever possible on Whiffins Avenue and indeed on Chatham waterfront, that the spoil from the excavations was dealt with on site where possible, because it is quite a significant cost to other schemes if they've got to take soil and rubble or whatever off site. And I should imagine if that was the case with MDC, it must be the case with a lot of other developers, that they don't want to pay the quite high costs of moving the materials. So you know, they, as a sort of a business, they can't determine when, and how much people will want to get rid of. That will very much depend on the market forces in any one time. But I think it's quite amazing from the photos we've seen this evening how much has been filled in, and I welcome it when it's done, and the sooner it's done, the better for everybody.
Thank you, Councillor Golvin. Councillor Peake.
Thank you. Just want to make sure that I haven't misunderstood. If we don't fill this in, presumably that means we cannot use it, and therefore we will not be able to pursue the great need that's already been stated this evening, that we need to develop more homes. And I know it's easy for me to say I'm not a resident, and I know this must be like having root canal treatment done, but sometimes if it needs to be done, it's got to be done. So I'm not quite sure what the logic is behind not doing this. What happens then? It's land that's never going to be used. I mean, if I've got this wrong, please clarify. Is there anything that, when it's the, I'll start again. When it was said, there it is, I'm trying to find the language here, dust cover plan, is that the wording? Sorry?
Dust management plan.
Dust management plan, that's a lovely term. How effective really is that, as in percentage terms? Like, does it 100% cover all the dust? Because I doubt it.
Generally speaking, what it requires is that there's dust suppression on site, so that might be with water sprays, etc., so that in dry conditions where the spoil is coming out of the lorries and it is kicking up dust, that is actually suppressed with a water spray usually. But that should be within the management plan, and as I said, I'm more than happy to follow that up and just to ensure that that's being complied with.
I'm still not sure how effective it is, but anyway. What was the other thing I was going to say? The thing about the cost, is there anything that we can do to assist in this matter when it comes to the cost to make it more affordable, please?
Yeah, I'll sort of clarify what happens should the application be refused today. So once we hit December of this year, the bottom line, they can't continue to infill anymore. So the hybrid application from 2021, which was the school and the housing, and more importantly, the restoration and conversion of the barn, whilst the school has come forward, therefore the application has been implemented in part, the rest of the application would not be able to come forward. Importantly, that does include the barn restoration and extensions, which is significant. The housing is a financially enabling project which allows us to secure that future use. It is an important Grade 1 listed barn. It's actually spectacular. The reason for the site visit in a couple of weeks is for members really to appreciate the importance of the barn and the significance of it and the beauty of it, and really what that can be as an asset within the borough. But that forms part of the 2021 application, which is the hybrid application. This application stems from 2010, although it has been extended, which is the Quarry infill. But this does need to happen in order for that to be implemented in full.
Councillor Hamilton.
So I just wanted to go back to the two aspects of pollution, the dust pollution that's affecting those on Parsonage Lane and the noise pollution. What can we do, as well as looking at the dust management plan being enforced, in terms of, obviously for health and safety reasons, you've got the noise coming from the vehicles, but in terms of noise pollution, what can we do?
Okay, Hannah's going to come back on the costs as well, that Councillor Peacock.
Am I? So, yeah, I understand that ward members have been advised of noise matters arising from site. As a local authority, we've yet to receive a complaint in relation to noise, as far as I'm aware. In terms of dust suppression, these sorts of sites, it is what it is. There's a management plan in place. We can only ensure that that's being complied with. But as far as I'm aware, we haven't had any noise complaints in relation to this site, and I am aware that they are well within their working hours as approved, so they don't work beyond, they've got consent till 5:30, they don't work beyond 4:30.
Sorry, just what time do they start in the mornings?
So the planning consent states 8 o'clock. I don't believe it's any earlier, but 8 a.m. till, well, they can do it up to 5:30, but they don't, it's less time than that.
Yeah, sorry, Hannah, I meant Peter was going to come back on that. Sorry about that. Right, over to you, Peter.
Thank you. Just briefly on the cost element that Councillor Peake has raised. In terms of the cost that they charge per load, which I think is what you were looking at in terms of whether we can regulate that. It's not a planning matter that we can get involved in. No more than dictating what a house builder charges for a house. It's a market situation. But what you'd seen from Hannah's slides is that the average number of loads over the last 12 months is just over 1,000. And in order to complete the fill by the requested time, they need 820 odd per month. Within that time. So I would suggest from those figures that they're probably pitching it at the right level in order to get the number of lorry loads in to meet the timescale that they're looking at. And just on the acoustic element, there is a condition that requires an acoustic fence be imposed, and that fence has been put in. Thank you.
Thank you, Peter. Councillor Pearce.
Thank you, Chairperson. The only other thing I was going to mention, and it's in response to the resident that put the objection in about the bleeping. Now, obviously that's health and safety related with the vehicles moving around on that site, so we can't regulate that. No disrespect to the resident, but we can't do anything about that. But we can regulate, of course, the timings, and as has been said, the operational timings have been adhered to. And it's been mentioned as well about the dust if that can be looked at and made sure it's being enforced. And as I said before, I don't think we've got any other choice other than to accept the extension to this and just basically hope that it gets done as quickly as possible so they can move on to the next phase of that site, which is the houses. The only other thing I was going to mention, I didn't have anyone come back to me on the agricultural land bit. Just if I can have clarification on that. It's condition number 14. Number 14. Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah. Sorry, just clarifying with Dave there. So the conditions that have been brought forward from the original consent are on this. These conditions don't relate to the hybrid application for the housing, so this is a separate entity effectively. So should that housing never come forward, then these conditions are to secure the quarry infill as a standalone.
Yeah, thank you for clarifying that. Yes, I understand what you mean now. So it will, if the housing doesn't happen for whatever reason, it will go back to literally what it was beforehand. Just quickly, Chairperson, just one last thing. I know it's with the barn, the visit to the barn, although it's not anything to do with this application, if we could, as the ward member has said, if we can extend that invite out to everyone, that would be great, although it's got nothing to do with what we're looking at this evening. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other member? No, right. Over to you, Dave. Do you want to say something?
Chair, thank you very much. In terms of the invite for the site meeting, it is on the member weekly list. There's no restriction. I sent the invite out to all members of the planning committee and ward councillors, but it is open generally, and it is on members' weekly list, or will be.
Thank you, Dave. Over to Vice Chair.
Thank you very much, Chair. This planning application, Manor Farm, Quarry, Parsonage Lane, move approval with conditions 1 to 26 as attached in the report. Thank you.
Thank you. I do feel for the residents living around this site, but I don't see any reasons for refusal, so therefore I will be supporting this application. So those for? Oh, God, seconded. Thank you. Those for?
That's 13, Chair.
Those against?
That's 1, Chair.
Thank you. The application is therefore approved. So now moving on to item 8 on the agenda, the report on Section 106 agreements, April to June. Chief Planning Officer Dave Harris is going to present this. Thank you. Over to you, Dave.
Chair, thank you very much. Members get this report on a quarterly basis. It's something we've been doing for years. It's really, really important. I think Councillor Pearce touched on it earlier when he was going through the Fenn Corner application. The importance of Section 106 and the importance of transparency on that, so that the public can see what monies are coming in, what it's being spent for. The government now have required there to be an annual report, an infrastructure funding statement. All councils need to do that. We do that, but these reports came in long before that was a legislative requirement. So what you see before you here is Section 106 funding received in the quarter April to June, the agreements signed in the quarter April to June, and then the final thing, Appendix 3, are the SAMs, the strategic birdwise payments. Happy to answer any questions. I think Councillor Field's got a question for me.
Councillor Field.
Hi. Thank you, Chair. It was in particular on plan application 19/0287. There's a sum of £690,000 for a shuttle bus to and from Cliff Woods. I just wanted to just check on the progress of that and how that's going.
Chair, thank you very much. And this indeed is an issue that Councillor Etheridge raises with me regularly as well, and the other ward councillors. And as And as you would have seen in the papers, it is a really sensitive issue to local people and an important issue to local people. So the two things there, the Redrow scheme and the Esquire scheme on Town Road. The Redrow scheme came out as a result of an appeal for Gladman's. What the applicants then did, that was Gladman's, they negotiated with Arriva to get a shuttle bus provision there, which is a 600 odd K, to address the sustainability problem there and the concerns that the original inspector had that the bus service out there was inadequate and didn't cope with or cater for commuters. So it didn't start early enough and it finished too early. So Gladman's then negotiated this shuttle bus. We've now got the money coming in. The question is, should we go for a shuttle bus or should we actually just improve dramatically the existing inadequate service, as Councillor Etheridge reminds me constantly there. In relation to the Esquire scheme, I know you haven't answered that question, which was a smaller development next to it. They had to make a contribution, which has been used to improve the 133 service. So it still doesn't make it much better, but at least it caters now for people on their way home from commuting. So the answer to your long-winded answer to your question, Councillor Field, apologies, is we get the money in. Do we deliver a shuttle bus, or do we just improve dramatically the existing service? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Etheridge.
Thank you, and thank you for that answer. Dare I suggest that any suggestions are coming forward, you discuss it firstly with the ward councillors and secondly with the parish councillors, so we're in agreement how we're moving forward. As in regards to the existing bus service, the majority of the buses going out there are cancelled because they keep breaking down or they can't get through the traffic in Strood. So the majority of my residents in Cliff and Cliff Woods quite often phone me up and saying, I've been standing here for 2 hours waiting for a non-existent bus. It's now got worse, and it's now affecting the school buses as well. So for your answer, it's not working at all.
Thank you. David, did you want to come back on that?
Absolutely, and Councillor Etheridge makes a really, really good point there. I've got a meeting with public transport team tomorrow to discuss the contribution, what it could be spent, what it should be spent on. Absolutely, there will be no decision made without speaking to the ward councillors and the parish council on that.
Councillor Field?
Yeah, I just wanted to come back on whether there was a time limit on the spending of the money. Now, obviously, that bus route goes for my ward as well, so we have very much joint interest in that. I do feel it's perhaps an example of why potential powers for better local regulation and accountability of bus services that have been produced might be of interest in actually solving some of these issues, because frankly Arriva services focus on getting people to and from Chatham for shopping hours, and they're not in any way adequate for these towns and the development plans that are coming through. So I believe that will be a very active conversation over the next couple of years, because we need to get it right.
Thank you. Any other member? Oh, Councillor Pearce.
Thank you, Chairperson. Yeah, I was going to mention 0287 as well, because that stood out, £700,000. And just to remind the committee, that was for a development of 225 properties. And I'm particularly interested because I won't mention the applicant or the application, but there is an application in my ward which is proposing similar bus provision for 240 homes, but their suggestion is nowhere near that figure of 700,000. So if it needed to be 700,000 to make that development sustainable in Cliff Woods, I'll be definitely mentioning that in representations to the application in my ward, which some members around this table will know what I'm referring to. Thank you. Cheers.
Any other member? No, and now move over to Vice Chairperson, Councillor Jones.
Thank you very much, Chair. The recommendation is that the committee is asked to consider and note the Section 106 funding received, those Section 106 agreements signed during the period April to June 2024, and habitat regulations contributions as set out in Appendices 1 to 3. I so move.
Thank you. Those for the report? Yep, for. Oh, seconded. Is that seconded? Seconded. Yeah, those for.
That's 14, Chair.
The report is approved. Thank you, officers and members. That is now the end of tonight's Planning Committee meeting.